especially in Canada right now, it's a pretty good time to be a Black entrepreneur because of all the work that's been done since BFN started. So many amazing organizations have started. I really encourage listeners interested in entrepreneurship to join the Bellum, Black Entrepreneurship Alliance, Federation of Black Canadians, Black Opportunity Fund, DMZ, Black North Initiative.
These organizations are known as the BIZ, the Black Innovation Zone. They're doing some work around that too.
Exactly. So stay posted with the Black Innovation Zone.
Hello. Welcome to the Okura podcast, aka T.O.P, where we're elevating you to the top. I'm your host, Justina Kanza. We've got some exciting guests for you today. I hope you stick around to the end and catch you soon. Today we're focusing on entrepreneurship, specifically Black entrepreneurship in Canada. And I have here Efosa Obano, the humblest guy I know, good friend, and he gave me my first job out of university, guys. So he's a big deal. He's a big deal. Efosa is a leader that does amazing work with the Black Founders Network, supporting Black entrepreneurs across Canada. And we're just really going to be talking about what it's like for you building your venture Black Founders Network, your journey as a leader, your career journey, and the future of Black innovation in Canada and the ecosystem that's being built. So thanks for coming, Efosa. How are you?
That's a deep question.
I feel like we've been talking about how you are the whole time, but yeah.
Yes, no, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I couldn't miss this opportunity. And I'm very excited for the conversation we're going to have. I think the work that you're doing to elevate those who are going to be listening to this and just unpack a lot of things for people is very needed. So
thank you. Maybe we start with a little bit of an introduction for people that don't know you. Who are you? What do you do? What is BFN? What do you stand for?
Yes. So Efosa Obano, I am Nigerian. I moved to Canada in 2013, 11 years ago now, for my university degree. When I was growing up in Nigeria, the desire to leave the country to study in university also came from how I grew up. I didn't have the most ideal conditions as a kid. I always asked my parents, what's behind the other places in the world that have 24/7 electricity or internet? And I would always read all these books. I was a very curious child. Then I got to see that entrepreneurship or innovation, companies were behind these things that I wanted to experience myself. The idea of entrepreneurship as a pathway for change or fixing things, that was where the seed got planted. So I kind of always had this desire to do entrepreneurship. When I was getting to university in Nigeria, at the time, there's always all these strikes and a lot of unpredictability. So I wanted to complete my degree. That was part of the motivation to leave the country. By God's grace, I was able to get into U of T. I have an uncle in Canada. I was actually trying to go to the US. I applied to more than 10 US schools, got into pretty much most of them, got so many scholarships, full scholarships. But then U of T was two. I applied to U of T and McGill, one of the two Canadian schools I ended up applying to. And this was because my parents were very concerned about guns and shooting in the US. So I'd finished applying to all my US schools, got to my admissions, and my uncle called my parents. I think maybe they were watching CNN or something, and they saw some shooting. So he was like, "Oh, Toronto is come to Toronto.
Safer.
It's safer." And I knew nothing about Canada at the time. So I wasn't even very happy about it. I did the application just to fulfill righteousness. But thank God, for immigration reasons as well, it's probably been a better decision in the long term. So anyways, I come to U of T. I study strategic management because I'm thinking, what's the thing that I can do that's closest to learning about business, entrepreneurship? And that was it. I know today's conversation is about BFN, but my first entrepreneurial experience was coming from noticing the shared lived experiences that Africans at U of T and in Canada had when we just moved. A lot of people had similar desires to learn here, take it back home, and improve their countries. At the time in the Scarborough campus, I had restarted the African Students Association at Scarborough. And from the conversations there, I saw this need for providing a platform for those of us who wanted to actually take action. I did that through another organization I had started before BFN called African Impact Initiative. That was my first entrepreneurial foray. And then when I graduated, because African Impact, I started that when I was still a student in 2016. So when I graduated, African Impact is a nonprofit. I needed to pay the bills. At the time, we didn't have a lot of funding or resources. I needed to stay in Canada because after you finish with the study permits, you need a job and a work permit to continue staying. I spent some time working at Dell Technologies Canada, where I got like my first real life experience, kind of work 9 to 5. It was a grind. My first role was supporting startups that were using Dell's technology and helping them navigate how they digitally transform. And then eventually I was managing the team that was doing that. Towards the end, also did a lot of social impact stuff. I was leading a social impact work in Canada, using Dell's resources to help nonprofits. We started the Black Networking Alliance, so an employee resource group focused on using Dell's resources to help the Black community. So I feel like the almost 4 years I spent at Dell helped a lot, like work ethic, the network that I was able to build, but also just understanding startups really well. And yeah, so that kind of accumulated into BFN. At the time at Dell, I'd gotten to this inflection point where I wanted to do more purposeful work. I'd been praying about it for almost 2 years and getting that conviction from God that there was something more that I should be doing with my time. My initial intuition was, let me get a role in Dell that's more purposeful. So all the things I did towards the time, my tail end in Dell, like, social impact pillar, the Black Networking Alliance, like that was me trying to do more purposeful work. Even when I was there, I did really well there. I won a lot of awards and had a lot of goodwill, a lot of social capital, like leadership loved me. So I kind of thought, God's plan is for me to grow here.
To climb up the ladder.
But that wasn't what it was. And George Floyd passing away triggered a lot of things in Canada as it relates to the Black community and how we were being treated. And in every sector, everyone was now aware of that more. And because of what I had done with African Impact at the time, at this time now towards the tail end at Dell, like the organization had grown. We'd raised almost $6 million.
And that's African Impact.
Yeah, African Impact, yeah. So it had grown. We'd been doing well. So the University of Toronto was the first supporter of that organization. Although this was all going on, I wasn't working, like I was overseeing it, but I made a decision, or even how that started was very clear that from my own perspective, that wasn't something that was going to necessarily enrich me, or so I've never like earned from African Impact. So that wasn't paying my bills, although it was growing. But because of the prominence that it was starting to receive, the university wanted to do something similar to that for Black entrepreneurs, or wanted to at least understand how could they serve Black entrepreneurs here, because that's focused on people in Africa, at least on the entrepreneurial side. So that was how the conversation even started. I got invited in September of 2020 to speak at an event from John, actually. John French, yeah. Like I had never heard of him or met him prior to that. He reached out to the people on the board for African Impact Initiative, that's like the U of T people on the board, for an introduction. And I just remember that introduction when it was Bill who made the introduction. And the way Bill phrased it, it's one of those moments where you just feel something special is coming from this. I couldn't explain it at the time, but because I was at Dell and I had so much going on, African Impact was busy, so much going on.
It felt like it was an alignment, like it was an aha moment from all the seed that God had planted on something bigger that you were called to. Exactly.
Yeah, so it was like one of those moments that you feel like something special is happening here. It's funny because then this was even to my Dell inbox, and my Dell inbox was I had thousands of...
Your inbox has always been...
Dell was worse than this probably. Yeah? Like it was customer facing, so like you had to answer stuff in the middle of all the chaos of my Dell work and my African Impact work. The fact that I even caught that email, I used to miss so many emails, especially when it wasn't work related. Thank God I saw the email and I was available to speak. So the event was about economic recovery from COVID, something like that. It was with Mars. At the time, I barely knew about Mars. Now, Mars is just next door, but then it was very close. So it was during COVID. And so my prompts, they asked me to speak on a panel. That was actually what the introduction was about. But I remember Bill had said, blah, blah, blah about the event. But then he said something to end the email that was like, but he also has a feeling that this introduction will lead to something special. Like he said it in a funny way. But there were just so many funny things about that, even the way I read it, and I just had a feeling. But like I said, I've been praying for almost 2 years. God, what is the next step? They gave me some questions around entrepreneurship. And this was the first time that they were asking me about, I'd even heard about like Black entrepreneurs because I was on panel because I'm doing work in Africa and I'm supporting entrepreneurs in Africa. So that was the perspective I was going to bring. A lot of my questions were about that. But then there was 1 or 2 questions that were about Black entrepreneurs in Canada that I was trying to prepare for the panel. I had to go do research about those particular questions because they were more focused on Black entrepreneurs in Canada. I did the research and there was not a lot of data at the time. From the little that I could see, it was crazy. Like the stats, like we've all heard the stats, less than 2% of funding. At the time, that was the case. I think that's still the case now. Annually, that goes to Black founders and all those things. So that was the first time I saw those stats. At the panel, when I was asked about that specific question, I shared some of the stats. I was honest, like, hey, I'm not by any means an expert in this space, but I did some research and this is what I found online. And everybody was flabbergasted and a lot of people were hearing that for the first time. So I remember it was so uncomfortable because I was one of the only Black person on the panel. And there was a bunch of white men. The innovation ecosystem at the time was still very, people didn't even know what to say in response to that. And everybody was very uncomfortable. But there was a general desire, oh, what can we do? How can we help? And I'm like, I'm also just learning about this too, but I think this is something we need to do something about. And we kind of left it there. So after the events, John and John's boss, John French, is the director of University of Toronto Entrepreneurship. Derek is the vice president, AVP of innovation. They are both important because how BFN ended up forming, that was the vision of the university that ended up supporting us to start. So John and Derek, they were not on the panel or they were listening into the event. The person that actually was moderating the panel at the time was the vice president of innovation, Derek's boss, Ted. Ted asked the question after the event ended. Ted sent an email, I think, just thank you for blah blah, and very, very thought-provoking, stats, and that they will probably be following up with me to learn more. Then John and Derek followed up to have a call. I remember on this call, they were they've been thinking a lot about what I shared. They feel like U of T, as a leading institution in Canada, needs to do something about this, especially because, they having all the stats around U of T entrepreneurship and one of the top, if not the top in Canada for ecosystem and blah, blah. They also realized that they weren't sure about how U of T was doing in terms of diversity in the entrepreneurship space. They didn't have the data. On the conversation, again, I was even feeling like, I don't know anything about this because they were asking me for a lot of answers. So I couldn't come to that conversation alone because at the time I hadn't done any of the work I'm doing now with Black entrepreneurs here. I remember I reached out to people in my network, more senior people who were doing work in the space. I remember Bimi at the time, he was the programs lead for the Black Innovation Program at DMZ. DMZ was probably one of the only programs that was doing stuff to help Black entrepreneurs then. And he was a personal mentor of mine. So I reached out to him to join the conversation. And then I also reached out to a lady called Chioma. She had started an organization called My African Corner. They used to do events in Toronto for African people. So I'd helped her with a few events. I remember I came to this call with both of them because I'm like, okay, these are people that have been in this.
The community. And can
exactly.
Speak more.
I think I also reached out to Isaac. I think there was also a conversation at the time with Isaac from Dream Legacy, now BKR, but then BKR wasn't even a thing. So anyways, we had these conversations with the leadership at the university and these folks were sharing their own experiences from what they think the challenges are and what they've observed from their work. I was listening for the most part. John and Derek were asking them questions, so they were answering. The only thing I remember contributing to that conversation was, as a startup person myself, helping startups whether it's Africa or the non-Black ones in Canada that I was helping at Dell. The number one rule I had learned was, before you build something, talk to your users.
That's something I carry with myself all the time. Before you build, talk to the community.
Talk to the people that you're trying to help. So I could just tell that the conversation, like when a lot of smart people are talking that also have a lot of experience with something they're talking about. So I'm guilty of this too. Like you can think you know the answer because you're so deep in the space. So I noticed there were a lot of beautiful ideas, great ideas, which a lot of them we ended up still doing as part of the solution. My only contribution was like, okay, guys, this is all great and whatnot, but I think we should, before anything moves far and before we say, let's do this, we should talk to the entrepreneurs that's we're actually going to be helping. And I mean, all of us here are kind of like people that help entrepreneurs. I guess we're entrepreneurs ourselves in a way too, but like there's so many more Black entrepreneurs that we should be consulting. So that was my one contribution to that meeting.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one too, because you could have very easily created these beautiful solutions that you thought the entrepreneurs needed, and maybe they needed them, but they're just such low priority for them.
Exactly.
Right? So you want to go back and understand, is it talent, is it capital, is it community? And I know you get to some of the challenges that you learned from the community, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs will want to hear that they're not alone in these challenges because the research validates and affirms them. And then too, for any decision makers, community leaders who are creating programs, dispersing capital, what have you, they want to understand what are the challenges that they can solve for in the community based on the research that has already been established. Exactly.
So it was so critical to take that approach. At this time, I didn't know what was going to happen. Like I didn't know there was going to be a program that came out of this. I guess we're just having a conversation, and I thought maybe the university would do something. I just thought it was still very early days, and I just thought, okay, U of T wanted to maybe give out some money to Black entrepreneurs, and maybe that's what they're going to try and design a program, like not even a program, like application, a one-off thing, exactly. Yeah. Because at this time I'm working full-time at Dell. I have African Impact, so in my mind, BFN didn't really exist. Nothing to that effect was even in my mind then, but it was more so just the first principles of entrepreneurship I was reminding everyone of. And so we agreed that, like, yeah, that makes sense. And then we kind of left the conversation there. So then after that, they followed up with me, John and Derek. They followed up with me directly. I didn't know if they were following up with other people, but it was like, oh yeah, they want to actually do the research. That resonated with them, because even when I was suggesting that, I posed the question to U of T Entrepreneurship at the time, they're like, oh, maybe you can go to your data from Black entrepreneurs that you have at U of T, and maybe that can be your first reference point, but that didn't exist at the time. So they had come back to me from that perspective of, okay, they want to actually do this research, but they actually don't have any data, so they need to almost start from scratch. But just to put it frankly, they were white men, and
they still are.
They are white men, so they were not as comfortable just like talking to Black entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
that was how the whole journey actually started. It was like, okay, by the side of my desk with my Dell job and my African Impact job, am I comfortable helping talk to Black entrepreneurs and just understand what the challenges are? Even the roadmap or the research questions, all of that was left to me to do, but just to come back with a better sense of what is needed. I was so busy then, and people asked me to do so many things. I was involved in so many side projects, but I prayed about it, and I got that strong conviction again, even without knowing. I remember I was in a relationship then, and even when I was talking to my girlfriend at the time about it, she was like, yes, impact on Black entrepreneurs, but like, you have no time. Like, at the time I was already so stretched, I had no time for even the relationship as much as I should have had to. So it made no sense from her perspective. She's like, yeah, how are you going to take this on?
You got to make time for me.
Exactly. Everything going on. But of course, like after I prayed and she prayed, we kind of got to the same page at the time about it. So that was how the initial journey started. It was fun. I wanted to meet new Black entrepreneurs. I was just like in people's DMs, anybody I could find that was a Black entrepreneur.
I just wanted to have conversations with them.
I would send them a message. Yeah. And so I ended up spending this whole conversation. The event happened in September. We had some meetings in October, November. Then it was December that the final conversation about our research that I agreed to do it. It was not a job again. I was still working my full-time job with Dell and doing African Impact. So my relationship with the university at the time was as a consultant. So I remember it was like special project or something. Like
made you feel special?
like some special project. There was some name that we gave it. The thing I just negotiated was I have to do this on my own time because obviously I have all these other things. So it was like evenings and weekends. So the next like January to like September, I spent those months every day almost talking to Black entrepreneurs, as many as I could. I talked to hundreds, one-on-one conversations, kind of like we're having now. And yeah, I use the template I use for like the startups use for user research. If anyone that's listening, I really recommend just Google Y Combinator or how to talk to users, and you would see the template. Just a few questions that you can ask to really understand problems people are facing, why they're facing the problems, alternatives that they've maybe tried, what they liked, what they didn't like. It's a template you can apply to almost anything, a startup, a program, whatever the case may be. You will get insights. And of course, you apply the same template to all the conversations, categorize the answers, and you begin to see things. So the biggest learning from that was, well, two things. One, why BFN has ended up growing so quickly is because of that approach. Because that approach allowed, even before anything existed, people to own the solution to what we were going to build for them.
Like truly for us, by us from the very beginning. They feel like they're part of building it because they gave the insight into what was needed to be built, and like it's been a strong and loyal community since.
Exactly. I can't even take any credit. Like I'm like, today that's great, but then I wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I was just doing user research, but that's like, looking back now, has been so critical because truly, that was how it was built. It was built based on what they said, and they felt and still feel like they own it. The most surprising thing from the whole thing was community. The biggest takeaway from putting all the data and gathering all the insights was that the thing people were missing the most was community. Black founders in Canada were missing the most was community. And this was in the form of being either the only Black entrepreneur in whatever programs they were attending at the time or going through. So many of them didn't even use programs to launch their startups. We found out that like, what's the number? Like out of all the people that had startups that I spoke to then, only 30% of them actually went through any like program or incubator. So people were just kind of doing it on their own. And so many people were not really aware about so many things that they had access to, whether it's government funding, whether it's accelerators, incubators. Like so many people were just building in silos, and they wanted to like build with people, not just anybody, but people that kind of understood where they were coming from and had a similar lived experience, and also up to down in terms of a lot of mentors or program leads or investors, whatever you call them, for those who were in programs couldn't relate to their lived experiences. So if you're deciding to build a Quera because of what you faced, the person that's like leading a program that you're part of that hasn't faced any of what you face is like, oh, you don't need an Aquera because
so they invalidate
a lot.
If you don't
of
have
things.
the right mentorship, you just stop building altogether because someone has told you it's not relevant.
So there's a lot of that too. So that was the biggest thing, and the decision to do a network, because even the name was crowdsourced by the community. After all the conversations, part of what I would have asked then was, what do you think we should build? What should we call what we build? And so that was when it started becoming clear that we may actually build something that comes out of this, and it would need to be a network. And then, of course, capital was big. I thought that was going to be the biggest thing.
The top one, I was like, if we had gone with assumptions, because we think all entrepreneurs need money, but Black entrepreneurs are not all entrepreneurs. Like our lived experience is very particular.
Exactly. If I had gone with my bias, I'd have done something that, money was always, and money is still part of BFN, but like that would have been a big focus. And maybe less, a lot of programs, the way they typically run, just do something very normal. But like we spend a lot, BFN, on fostering community, and just we've built it in a different way. It might not even seem financially smart from a just ROI perspective, but like is intangible, like those, like fostering community. You can't quantify it the way you can quantify some other things. So the events, the huddles, the activations, all of that. And then you find that capital, capacity building, which was the other big need that came out of the research, the guidance, all of that community is the foundation for all of that to still flow. Yeah. Money moving, where people investing, all of that is still a function of relationships, right? Definitely. Mentorship, capacity building is still a function of relationships. We also found, and I didn't know this at the time, but in hindsight, community has been the catalyst of everything that we needed to do. So yeah, like that was the journey. After we did the research, I brought it back. I was surprised by it when I was analyzing it. That's the thing, when you're doing this process without any biases, it's such a beautiful experience. You just learn stuff and the data doesn't lie.
The data speaks for itself.
Wow, this is what people are actually saying, and what do we make of this? I remember being so perplexed because I was like, well, this is not what I was expecting. I was a bit, not unhappy, but you have a thought in your mind. I didn't know how to move forward when I saw the data. But yeah, I was praying about it, talking to people, and just being true to the data. Let's try this experiment. Let's see if we can do a network. And so at this time, it started becoming clear that it would need to be something that requires more time, bandwidth. There was a lot happening at Dell. I got a promotion in May of 2021, and I left Dell in September of 2021. So my leaders at Dell at the time, they had started sensing, I'd been very vocal that I wanted to do something more purposeful.
And I'm sure you two at the time kind of felt that that's what you needed in May when you got the promotion.
To be honest, I was confused. Like, I didn't want to take it. Like, I was like, God, what are you doing? You know that I want to leave.
A temptation.
I was so confused. And my heart at the time in May, although BFN wasn't yet ready to go, by May, I already kind of knew the research was going on. I was seeing, so I knew that whatever this might become,
it's going to be big.
Yeah. And I might not it just felt disingenuous to give Dell the impression that I was here for the long haul. So, I mean, I didn't take it at first. When I got the promotion from my manager then, or my director, I told him, also at Dell, if you take a promotion, you can't move internally for a certain amount of time. So, first of all, I just knew that I wanted to, even if I was going to stay at Dell, be doing something a lot more different from what I was doing then. Internally, for the next 18 months, I can't move. So that was already, even if I was going to not leave the company, I was like, yeah, I can't tell you that I'm going to happily take that and be happy. So it was almost like, if I'm taking this means I'm going to have to leave the company. And I was honest about that. I even called John before I told John to, like, can we do anything sooner? Like, can I leave now so that I don't have to accept this because this kind of feels wrong? But yeah, I mean, at the time, I was basically pitching to the university to invest in. They didn't have the resources to do it then. So it was like, unfortunately, we can't move forward now. I ended up going back to Dell. It got escalated to the president. I talked to the president. When I just started, she was a director in my division. So I had a relationship with her before she got her promotions. 4 years later, we talked and I told her the same thing. She was like, she gets it, but I should look at it as a reward for my performance because I was doing very well. And so part of getting the promotion was based on how I'd been doing at Dell. And she was also like, the stuff about moving internally, like if the opportunity that I want, because Dell didn't want to lose me. So they were also working on some things I'd been asking for to create a role that I wanted. So she was like, if the role gets approved in that window of 18 months or whatever, she gave me the guarantee that she would waive any restrictions. And I'd been praying about it too, trying to get my conviction from God because I was like, I'm confused. What are you doing?
Yeah.
In hindsight, with all the U of T wasn't ready to fund anything to start BFN. The president gave me the kind of go ahead with like, okay, if I have to end up staying here, she'll make it work.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lesson there for listeners on negotiation. How do you navigate that piece? Because you're negotiating not with your manager, not with your director, with the president, right? With the top of the top. How do you navigate that? And you're so young at the time as well. Where do you get the confidence? How do you build that? Because I think a lot of people are navigating similar situations.
I think honestly, just being honest and transparent is the first thing with every stakeholder involved. That's the first thing because like I knew what I wanted and you say what your heart wants. You also have to read the room and know the leverage you have or don't have. With Dell, I had leverage because I was an asset to them. I was bringing a lot of business to the company. I was managing like millions of dollars in projects, like I had like almost 30 people reporting to me. So I was doing like a lot for the company and they didn't want to lose me. So I had leverage then, which is why it got escalated to the president. I think being transparent, knowing the leverage you have, and then just like not being boxed into, because at the end of the day, my faith was probably the biggest factor. Once I got the conviction from God that, okay, although you don't understand what's happening right now, this is I want you to take this step. Then that was the calming assurance I needed. In hindsight, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have been able to negotiate I guess, when I was talking to the university, when the time finally came to fund BFN, just how much funding BFN got.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm living there, so my salary is going to have to start coming from BFN. Long story separate to this, but it's kind of related, was I was closing a house around the time that I was leaving Dell, and I'd already gotten my pre-approval earlier because it was a pre-construction. So that pre-approval was tied to my salary at Dell.
Yeah.
But in summary, it was like, if that promotion didn't happen, I wouldn't have been able to have a salary
like
at
leverage
BFN.
as well for your negotiations with BFN.
Exactly.
So that's why
which could have affected my
Yeah.
approval for my house. When it all made sense, I'm like, okay, yeah, God, I can see what.
yeah, it's clear now.
But at the moment, it was very confusing. So, anyways, that all happened, and then I took the promotion. But when the BFN thing actually finalized, nobody was surprised because I'd already told everybody that I'm also working on this other thing outside work that might turn into something. Yeah. So when it came to pass, funny enough, Dell was like, oh, okay, so now all the things I'd been asking for, we can actually do it in 3 months. Can you wait for 3 more months? Like, before I was like just about to leave, but I knew that BFN was what I was meant to do next. So that didn't necessarily hold me back. That was 2021, September was when I started full-time working on BFN. University gave us support. Since then, we've expanded beyond that, getting support from other people.
Yeah, oh, that's beautiful. I feel like that's the longest I've heard you tell the story, because I've heard the story in different pieces. Every time we're at events or in the office, like we just have bite size. But I'm glad to hear it in full for myself, for listeners, because a lot of the listeners will be people that are members of the BFN community and they're trying to understand how is this organization supporting us and impacting us so much. Like, what is the story there? BFN is built. There's a lot of faith that goes into building it. There's a lot of community research that goes into it, a lot of sacrifice that goes into it. You're going to start this new organization that has some funding. It's a startup. You're leaving a fully paid job at a time where you just bought a house, right? And you need the stability more so than anything. So there's a lot of faith in the vision, a lot of faith in what you were called to do for the community, but also a lot of sacrifice for stability, giving up stability for innovation and creativity. A lot of entrepreneurs will relate to that. But now BFN is built. What is BFN? Based on all the research, what have you built with BFN? How is it impacting the community? And how has it been since, I think, 3 years now?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And just to piggyback on what you said at the end, it was, when I say they funded it, literally the funding was like what I would get paid as a salary for 1 year. That was all the university gave me at the time before I left Dell. So it was like, okay, we'll allow you to experiment on this thing for a year, but the resources to do anything else, like to host an event, if it wasn't during COVID, it wouldn't have worked out. Because then everything was virtual. So I mean, everything was just on Zoom. Exactly. I could still do stuff on Zoom. But yeah, there was no money apart from what I was paying myself. And I was even still not taking necessarily like a pay bump. It was like a pay cut, but the pay cut was reasonable enough to just get by, close the house, all of that. So yeah, to your point, and I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with in BFN, otherwise, there's usually that like, you're in corporate, you kind of get to this point where you want to do more impactful, purposeful work, which I think just we're all created with gifts, skills, talents to do more than just like, make a living working for some company. Not that you can find that purpose within the company and companies.
Well,
But yeah, just to not be in a situation where you don't feel like your day-to-day 9 to 5 is actually having you live out your full potential. So many people are in that situation, but especially people that are that are born to be entrepreneurs who are kind of struggling to jump. So yeah, I echo that a lot, and I think it almost never is the perfect time. There's always going to be an element of risk and stability, except you were just born with very wealthy parents or something. You have a stash of money somewhere. But yeah, half the time you have to take that leap. And yeah, for me, it was my faith was my big compass, and God made it very clear to me. But whatever that is for whoever is listening, like try to get that thing that will allow you to leap, kind of take that step. And of course, don't do it foolishly. Like, I left on very good terms. I could always go back and be like,
that, because now Dell is supporting BFN and is one of the partners
Dell, one
of
of us,
BFN.
exactly. They needed to wait and see, okay, what is this thing going to really be?
Yeah.
But yeah, when we now became a big thing, like Dell is now one of the people that's funding the work we do as well. But that was also because I maintained a good relationship with my leaders when I was leaving. I didn't like, oh yeah, bye kind of thing. I involved them in the whole process. So yeah, the mission is to create an inclusive community for Black entrepreneurs at different stages of their journeys, and to provide them with the right mix of capital, community, capacity building to launch, fund, and scale impactful startups. The vision is a thriving community of Black founders and Black-led companies from every industry and every stage. When I was growing up, thinking about role models, entrepreneurs that I looked up to, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, blah, blah, blah. You could count like 10 fingers before you counted a Black person. The goal is to get to a point where a kid is looking up to role models and they count Black entrepreneurs. Started in 2021, 3 years in October. So we actually launched in October that year. And yeah, by God's grace, we've been able to do a lot. In addition to U of T, U of T is no longer even the biggest funder of BFN now. The ministry, like the Canadian government, has given us a lot of support. Corporate partners like KPMG, Dell, NACO, Black Opportunity Fund. So yeah, like we've been resourced to continue the good work. I think right now we've raised about 4 million in total. And yeah, I've been blessed to work with an amazing group of people. You were the first full-time hire. And since then, so many amazing people have joined. And so the mission, we're still building it. We haven't achieved the full vision, but we're a lot closer to. Their community has grown to thousands of people. So many cool things have happened. Talking through the story now, I didn't envision even this. Like, I know I have not even gotten to the full potential or picture yet, but even just how far we've come, I totally did not envision that when everything was starting. I think that approach we took has just compounded because even as we've been growing it, as we've been building it, the events, the programs, everything has been we've built it like a startup. Yesterday, for example, we had a full day, 9 to 6 of retrospective where we're looking back at the programs this year, the events this year. And this year we had a much bigger team, including the part-time experts and entrepreneurs in residence. So a lot of ideas. But the very fact that we're taking inputs from the founders, whatever we do next year is going to be more relevant to them. And they will engage because they told us to do something and we've done it. So the biggest lesson I've learned from how we've built it is still driving our culture and our values right now in terms of really having the community build it and tell us when we make mistakes, because we've made a lot of mistakes.
Absolutely.
Help us to shape or reshape things. It's harder to build that way, especially at the stage we're at now, because it's a lot easier just practically to have a structure and to build in a certain way. You have to keep being iterative to truly serve the community. So
yeah, that's the side. And I know we talked about this a lot in the past, and we've heard this from the community, because there's now a lot of organizations like BFN that are serving the Black community or doing different things. And we'll talk about them in a second when we share resources for entrepreneurs. Yes. But when we ask the question on what is BFN's secret sauce, like what's the one thing that they know they can come to BFN and get that they won't get from other organizations, it has been the community piece, right? So to your point, it will be easy to have structure and just do things in one rigid way. But the thing that has brought BFN this far and the thing that we've been bringing it further is having the community involved from the very beginning. It might be a little bit of an inconvenience from an operational side to keep iterating those things. But at the end of the day, the priority is the impact, and you're listening to the community and building solutions that are tailored to them.
Exactly.
What does BFN offer to entrepreneurs? What can they trust to come to BFN for? What are the different programs that you have for the different stages and also different industries that people are building in?
Yes, great question. We have the structure for BFN open to any sector. We learned that from the research as well. It would have been difficult to restrict it to certain industries. So it's open to every sector and stage of the entrepreneurial journey, whether you're just thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or you have an idea all the way to you have a business. The community layer is probably the first layer of what BFN offers, where we do events, have a lot of activations and provide opportunities for people on the entrepreneurship spectrum in the Black community to connect. We also have newsletters. We've been trying to build out its digital version for people in our programs. I've learned a lot from that process of trying to roll out
We've been trying to roll it out since 2020. Is it 2023?
Literally, for 2 years now.
Yeah.
It's been a blessing in disguise that it's taking so long because we've gotten to do mini digital versions of BFN
of it, yeah.
and learned a lot of lessons. I don't even think the way we're obsessed with rolling out one big thing, I don't think we're actually going to do that anymore because I think it's hard to do community in a digital way at scale. It's kind of like trying to recreate what you can do in person, right? And it's hard to, without it losing its substance and just all the people that might come and spam, it's hard to have that same thing that people feel at our events in a digital thing that's not thoughtfully done. So that's what we've learned. We have digital versions of BFN right now. It's not as inclusive as we would like in the sense of not everyone has access to that. But slowly we're building out that it's been tied to people in our different programs, having digital silos that connect to each other. And the parts where it's like, okay, you're not part of any BFN program, that's the first layer of BFN. If you want to join, just on social media, we're there, just Google Black Founders Network. On Instagram, it's BFN Community. And in our bio, there's links to subscribe and all that stuff. Then the programs, which are now tied to the different stages and the pillars, we have BFN Core, which is our starting point for anybody who is an aspiring Black entrepreneur or has an idea. We do a lot of pitch competitions. I don't know when this is going to air, but the next one we have coming up, for example, is in January. BCC. All around during the year, we have opportunities for aspiring Black entrepreneurs to get funding, typically up to $5,000 to work on their MVPs, like their minimum viable products or service. We also have a program that runs every year under this stream called BFN Smart Start, where we provide $4,000 each to aspiring Black entrepreneurs with ideas. The difference between this and the pitch competitions is in addition to the money, you get a lot of mentorship, actual curated programming with milestones of launching your MVP. And then for this stream in general, we also help people a lot with co-founder matching or finding co-founders. Recently, we've launched a pillar called the Developers and Designers Now in Residence program, where you can also get free access to technical support to build, because we saw that a lot of people that have ideas but that don't have the skill set. Obviously, getting a team is the ideal solution, but in between when you have the idea and when you are able to get people to join, when you need to get work done on the product, we pay developers and designers all year round who are able to support to build that. People in BFN get access to that. The overall goal for this stream is you come in with an idea, we help you do the research to validate it with your target customers, get your first team or get the help you need to build the thing, and we help you to launch it in the market to your very first customers. So that's core. Then Accelerate is our middle stream. You're a bit farther down. BFN Accelerate. It's a cohort-based program that runs every year as well. That helps you to accelerate your growth with your business. So you need to be a Black entrepreneur, and the company has to have at least one Black co-founder to be eligible to apply. You also need to have early traction. Every year that is evolving now because the bar keeps getting higher in terms of
it's getting more and more competitive.
It gets really competitive, So early traction in customers or in users. So you're not just starting, you've started and you're seeing okay, you're actually solving something that people want. And there's evidence of that. So people that get into this stream get up to $25,000 per company. It's a mix of money you get during the program. Each company gets about 10K during the program, and then demo day you're able to compete for a bunch of prizes as well. And the program itself is 4 months typically in length, so it usually runs in the summers. You get to build alongside the brightest, most talented Black entrepreneurs. You get supported as well by the brightest and most talented Black entrepreneurs who have gone through the program in the past and are doing a lot better now. The goal of the program is to help you accelerate your customers, your funding, and whether it's a product or a service business, whatever type of business, your its ability to do what it's supposed to really be doing well. It's really intense. It's a lot, almost like a pressure cooker, surgical operation. But every time that we've done it now, we've done it for 3 years. The businesses are better off when they come out of it.
I was just telling the videographer Graham about One Click.
Yeah.
One of the businesses that went through the program, I think they've raised almost $1 million.
Probably over $1 million now, yeah.
So many good stories from it.
So many good stories. Alumni of that program, I don't know what the number is now. It's probably over 20 million that they've raised since they left. And then the last stream, BFN Scale, finally doing something structured for that next year. It's the stage that's for companies that are just having recurring growth in revenues and sales. So you're not necessarily trying to launch or accelerate like you already are doing well. I would argue a company like Wovio is probably in that stage.
That area, yeah.
And it's really just about, okay, how do you then scale what you're doing and go from being a startup to a growth stage company that's stable. So what we're going to be providing, historically, it hasn't been cohort-based prior to next year. It's just been a lot of alumni companies from our Accelerate program and companies that were already at that stage before that kind of comprised of those in this pillar. We typically help folks to close their rounds. So a big goal of companies at this stage is you've done a lot to validate. You have traction and you're trying to close your round. If it's a venture round, or you're trying to get some more money from the bank, if it's a non-venture round. We provide as well, we're going to be providing capital 50K and upwards to the companies that gets into, now that we're doing a lot more structure.
And this will be grants or actual investments?
We're going to be doing grants and potentially investments. We're in early conversations about figuring out, like a lot of the partners that want to work with us on this, traditionally BFN has never invested capital, it's always been grants. But for Scale specifically, it might be both. More to come soon. We're in early conversations to just figure out how do we, because we're not like a fund, and my personal belief for the Canadian Black entrepreneur space is that there's way too many businesses that are in need of grants, experiments, and to
and
fail.
Some flexibility, because once you take capital investment as well, it's a different story.
It's a different ballgame. The pressure is
always very conducive for creativity and exploration.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why we've structured BFN how we've done it and why we give the money the way we give it. Even with debt or loans, it's not as expensive as equity capital, but it's also like it puts some strain if things don't go well.
Stress,
and people need to, in ecosystems, how they are built there's a lot of experimentation, and it's often not in your first company that does well. Your second company usually does better than your first and your third. With Scale, because of the amount of capital provided, especially if you've gotten to this point, is a safer bet to take on an investment. So we're exploring that. More money than the other two. But even when we do the cohort-based one that we're going to be launching soon, it wouldn't be as heavy touch as an Accelerate or a Smart Start, because at that point as well, like your time is like me.
And you're also already over mentored. Just give me the money.
You need the money, you need to connect with the partners, you need it's all about outcomes. Personas will be working closely with who would be in this program would be really busy people. So we'll have a few things, maybe 3 or 2 that we laser focus on for a period of time, whether it's getting into a new market, whether it's launching this new product, whether it's validating this new business model, whatever the case may be. But a few things that we'll focus on in addition to the money that stopping you from scaling. That's what we're going to be focused on. Those are 3 main programs.
Yeah. And speaking of money, though, because everyone is going to be asking, it's like, where do we get the money? I know BFN is one place, but there's only a handful of people that you can
That we
reach,
can
at least
support
at this
every year.
moment. So, what are
Yeah.
some resources that Black entrepreneurs can access, whether it's diluted or undiluted
Non-dilutive
capital?
funding. Great question. This is something we're launching. I think I've seen Acquire do a good job at this too, like just democratizing these grants, like providing it to people. So we're going to also be having a database of these grants. There's a lot of them, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit business. Shameless plug for that, but we'll be sharing that soon, depending on when this is airing. Sources of capital in general, right? Something that I've seen that we do a lot in Canada is we only go for the Black entrepreneur things.
I'm a victim of that too. We're missing out on so much.
There's so much more, like
Yeah.
even just the government alone, the economic innovation, economic and science development arm of the government. If you just go to their website, there's so much there. Your sector, if you're in healthcare, if you're in education, there's so much there, like Shred. You get money from the government that you can use to pay salaries or to do research. So my general advice, if you're an entrepreneur, now that there's AI and all this stuff, literally just ask ChatGPT.
What are the
What are the resources
Yeah.
for Canadian businesses like in healthcare? And you see on the government side.
Even
for
Happily
grants.
AI is a tool
Happily
that
AI.
we've used. So if you just Google HAPPLY.AI,
Yes.
they have billions of dollars worth of funding, grants, loans, and everything in between. So
Happily.
that's a good tool.
Amazing
Yeah.
platform for that as well. So there's money out there. The hard part is not getting the money. The hard part is building stuff
that's
like
investable.
yeah, like passes all the barriers of all the applications you'll be applying for and whatnot. And then yeah, we have a hiring grant too, like especially for people who are not entrepreneurs but want to work with entrepreneurs. This was a program you also played a big role in, helping us create the Black Career Advancement Program,
Yeah.
where we provide grants to Black-led companies to hire Black talent. So we're going to be in about a week now updating that program with a bunch of new components to really help drive Black talent working with Black-led startups, because we've done it now for 2 years and it's been amazing. The impact has been great on a small scale. So now we're trying to open it up. And so, yeah, there's that pool of capital as well that's accessible.
Yeah, there's so many resources, honestly. So yeah, use ChatGPT, go to Happily AI, also join organizations like BFN. There's
Plug for
the other organizations,
yeah.
yes. Nobellum is
Nobellum.
one of them. I'll make sure they're all tagged. Nobellum, BEA, Black Entrepreneurship Alliance,
Federations of Black
Federations of
Canadians,
Black Canadians,
DMZ,
Black Opportunity Fund,
BOF,
DMZ. There's so many organizations, and these are the ones that are just Black focused. But like Efosa mentioned, don't just be limited by the ones that are Black focused. There's some that are general. They serve everyone, and you might be a good fit for those too. This has been amazing. There's just so much. I feel like there's still so much for us to say. So as we wrap up, I just want to end with a few aspiring words for entrepreneurs. What do you have if you could give 5 pieces of advice? I know you've dropped a lot along the way, but 5 pieces that have helped you become a leader at such a young age, have helped you in your career, have helped you stay true to the mission and stay down to earth. I think that's very important. Stay down to what is the mission, to support community and not get overwhelmed by all the noise outside of that. What's that pieces of advice you have?
Some advice, I guess first, even piggybacking off the last bit of the conversation, on a practical level, especially in Canada right now, it's a pretty good time to be a Black entrepreneur because of all the work that's been done since BFN started. Around the same time, maybe shortly after, like so many amazing organizations have started. So everyone that you mentioned, I really encourage listeners interested in entrepreneurship to join Nobellum, Black Entrepreneurship Alliance, Federation of Black Canadians, BOF, Black Opportunity Fund, DMZ, Black North Initiative.
These organizations are known as the BIZ, the Black Innovation Zone. They're doing some work around that too.
Exactly. So yes, stay posted with the Black Innovation Zone. We also saw the need to collaborate amongst ourselves because we're serving the same people.
Can be quite siloed very easily.
And you were with us, like Power of Community, that first one we did in Mars
in 2023.
has just compounded into so much, right? So there's that. And the BIZ, Black Innovation Zone, is going to also be expanded in a sense. We want to truly make room on the table for every Black focused organization because the demand is more than even the ones that are part of it right now can
handle. Yeah.
So more to come there, like publicly. But yeah, I wanted to say that as a Black founder in Canada, there's so much being done for you right now that you need to be in your safe space, especially those that are just getting started. Those that are already building businesses in the space are the ones I'm like, guys, okay, get out of the Black space alone and get the other resources. But yeah, if you're just getting started and you want a safer landing, and then you're more like, I guess, on the lens of just personal advice, I would say a bunch of things. One, like the way you look at failure, or especially in entrepreneurship or getting started, a lot of people are scared of starting something new. I remember when I was starting African Impact, it was daunting to put something out there that I'm doing this. What if nobody follows this? Those are real fears, real anxiety points. I guess you have to be very clear on why you're doing, and oftentimes, like, you won't last as an entrepreneur if your why is superficial, if it's not authentic. That has to be important. And once your why is legit, like once there's a problem you're really trying to solve, you're not just being opportunistic about something or superficial, like, then, you know, if you do business the way you should, if you like do customer research, connect with people who have the problem, that will keep you going. You need to build a solution, even if it's just one person that can use it. That will keep you going from the, nobody's following my Instagram, or I don't have, like, whatever things are bothering you. It should be, I'm building a solution that people actually need. And that's hard. Even just doing that, getting through the validation phase, having the resources to build the product, or doing it without resources. All the ecosystem things are out there right now make that easier than it's ever been. So if you literally find a problem that is real, that you validated, let that drive you and help you refocus and not get distracted by the noise or the anxieties. I don't look at anything as a failure, because if it doesn't work, you learn from it. The best entrepreneurs are people that have just been at it, like,
For a long
is a
time.
muscle that you build with time, is a skill you sharpen with time. The sooner you get started, the better your odds in general as an entrepreneur. When I look back, so many things that I viewed as failures at the time are the things that taught me how to do it better the next time. Right? So if you reframe your mindset and start viewing failures not as failures but as lessons, then you want to fail. Like, you want to fail as fast.
Fail forward.
You know, and you want to keep failing, because like, you never, like, no business ever has it all figured out. Nobody ever has it all figured out. Embrace the thrill of learning, not failing. Like, you embrace the thrill of, like, I'm going to try something and be open-minded to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, how can I do it better? If you reframe your mind in that way, then that fear of whatever is starting and whatnot will also really be low. Today, I'm working on some things that I still want to try and see if they work. I'm a lot less scared. Know yourself. That's the other one. So, alluding to what I said before at the beginning, where I feel like a lot of people are doing things that they were not built to do. That is, you're not living your fullest life.
Just doing something because it's trendy, or because of some glory that you think it will bring to you.
Yeah, or because you just have to make a living and get paid doing a salary, which makes sense. You have financial needs, so you're just doing this job. But I truly believe that we were all created with unique gifts to be used for the benefits of others. Like, I didn't go into it in this conversation, and we don't have as much time. I've told my story of my faith and how I almost passed away, and there was, like, I came to full knowledge of what life is about, God, everything. And that was a game changer for me. That was what gave me this clarity of mind. And that was when I started praying, okay, God, what do you want? What is it that you have for me? Once you know yourself and once you know your purpose, then everything is a lot easier in general. Yes, failure, yes, fear, whatever, but there's a lot of clarity that doesn't phase you because you know what your purpose is. In a perfect world, spiritually, is a lot easier when you get that from God directly, because he will tell you if you seek him. But if you don't believe in all that, there's ways you can still discover that practically, even outside the spiritual perspective. So think back to when you were a kid, like, you've exhibited your gifts. What are the things that you've been good at just naturally? It doesn't have to be boxed into a job or a field, or like, so you find people with talents that they don't think are worth anything because they can't see how this would be a
I
job,
can monetize it.
you know,
Yeah.
or this is I can't study this. There's nothing to study in this skill. Look at the work I'm doing. Like there was nothing like I'm not an entrepreneur. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm helping entrepreneurs. What could I have studied in school to do this, right?
Exactly.
Don't be constrained by the
Job
world.
titles, by industries and whatever.
all these
like,
boxes.
Be
'Cause
bold enough to create a new path for
Exactly.
yourself.
Just look inwards first, practically. Think back to when you were a kid. Think back to when you were in high school and in uni. What have been things that have come easiest to you to do? And then what's the intersection of that? That's one box. Second box is what are the things that you don't like about the world? What are the things that bother you? And it could be anything. There's no wrong answer to this. If you write down the first one, things that you've been really good at very naturally, things that you've enjoyed doing, it's come easier to you compared to other things. And oftentimes people would have told you this. People would have complimented you.
Maybe that's a good place to start. Ask a few people in your life, what are things that I'm really good at from just watching me? Because sometimes we're our worst critics and we won't be as honest. But hopefully the good people in your life can point it out for you.
Your parents will tell you. Your siblings will tell you. Your childhood friends. And then the things that your heart bleeds for. Think about that as well. Reflect on it. Like, what are the things that, like, if you could change this about the world, you will, like, change it. Write those things down too. Your purpose is the intersection of those two things. You were created with these skills to change this thing.
Problem.
And like it's never like a job or like to evolve. Like there's so many ways. What I've learned along the way, the failures I've had, all the experiences are equipping me. Even what I'm doing right now is still equipping me to do stuff that I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
But it's going to be aligned with those two. Because as I'm doing more work, I'm adding to the lists. I'm learning more about myself. There are more things I'm bothered about in the world today. I want to use my skills. That clarity is very critical, especially as an entrepreneur. Especially as an entrepreneur. You have to forge a different path and you have to be comfortable doing that. But you have to be grounded in the fact that you know what you're here for. Oftentimes, taking the spiritual perspective, it's for the benefit of others. The best companies, the best things that make the most money are just helping people. They're making life easier. If it's ever driven by the wrong motives, I mean, it shouldn't be driven by money, but oftentimes you end up making... Yeah, but no, because like the most critical businesses make the most money. So money is going to be an end product.
But it shouldn't be your driver.
Shouldn't be what is driving you.
Yeah.
I mean, my name means God's wealth. And part of God revealing my purpose to me was, I'm going to, like, capital is a tool that he's going to use to redeem the world. It's his wealth. It's not my wealth or anybody's wealth. It's a very slippery slope because if you're chasing it, then he can't even trust you with it because you won't use it for what he wants. Money, we'll have a whole podcast about money.
About money,
right?
We'll have you back. Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, you have your needs and you have your, like, I have to pay my mortgage. There are things I have to do. So be reasonable about your finances and whatnot. But like that shouldn't be what's driving you primarily.
Yeah, I think you made a good point around understanding what it is that you are made for, like the difference between the skills that you have and the solution that you are meant to impact on the world. And in the middle of that is your purpose and your why and the different roles that you will play to meet that purpose. They'll change over time.
Keep evolving,
and I've had to find that out for myself, like, because I was thinking, what is my why? I remember as a young kid, you mentioned, what does your heart beat for? That thing that brings you excitement. It was always like, I'm going to change the world one day. And a lot of kids think that way. But then you grow up, you're like, that is quite grandiose. Yeah. Like, that's a lot of pressure. I just want to make my bed. But then I got back a little bit. I'm like, okay, what does change the world mean for me specifically? It's like change the world is make people's lives better, make people's lives elevated. It's like, okay, so I don't need to change the world. I need to change the next person's world. But that is also still grandiose because it's not my responsibility, right? But what I can do is give them resources and support and community to change their world as they see fit, because it's not my role to do that for them. And once I was able to identify that, I now know that I'm never really tied to, even as an entrepreneur, like one venture or one job. It will look like different things. At some point, it looked like BFN, and I was able to make so much impact through that. But right now, it looks like Wovio. It also looks like Okwera. So having that will really help you stay grounded and will help you feel content at the end of the day. You're not just going
just
around
chasing,
aimlessly.
like, you know your why, you're just, it's so critical. The last piece of advice that I would share relates to networking or mentorship and connecting with others. I've said this a lot at events. I always try to emphasize this when asked to give advice to people that are early on in our careers. There's a lot of obsession with connecting with mentors who are successful, like accomplished. And by all means, we should keep doing that. It's important to have a group of those people that are doing things or have done things that you want to do. So being intentional about that, by no means saying we shouldn't. Like, that's been a very important part of my story. But it's been more impactful and important in my story to connect with people who are where I am at the time, that have similar interests and passions, and showing it by their actions in an excellent way. They're not like, nobody knows them yet or whatever. Like, what? I'll give an example. Like, a lot of people that I'm working with today, we built very strong relationships with each other 8 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever the case may be. When we're going out volunteering at things, trying to, like, with entrepreneurship, startup, Black community things. Today, 7 years of compounding in similar stories to mine, they're doing amazing things now, right? So they're like started companies, they're investing in companies, they are directors in places, whatever the case may be. And these guys have co-invested with me now. They've been how I got money in some cases for sponsors, but at the time, nobody knew who I was. So they were just students running around. The compound effect of everyone grinding in a similar space has paid crazy dividends. So I'm still like that today. Like, I'm still very just like, yes, there's people that everybody's lining up to talk to at an event or in Pioneer. Everybody wants to talk to the panelists, all of that's cool. But talk to the person beside you. Do that a lot. So I just talk to as many of the people. And when you sense like someone's interest is aligned with yours, which is often the case if you're maybe at an event that's tied to something that both of you care about, like, then get to know them, be intentional about forming relationships with them. I'm not saying be manipulative in your friendships.
Value exchange.
Yeah, you would align more depending on your own goals and motives. Authentically, you connect more with people who are like you. In my case, it was like, okay, I want to have impact with my life. I want to help entrepreneurs, help startups. My why was very clear. People that were like that then that I became friends with are doing amazing things now. So it wasn't manipulative in that sense, but be intentional about the relationships you form, especially with your peers in your space. Optimize for that even more than trying to connect with very important people because it's easier. Everyone is more accessible. And yeah, so just easier to, and you learn so much. They learn so much from you, but then you thank yourself for that relationship in years. We're young, so there's so much time that I get excited when I meet someone I didn't know that like, I'm like, wow, I'm impressed by this person, what they're doing. And like, okay, yeah, I'm trying to connect with this very famous person that can help me. So the cool thing about this is the younger you are or the earlier you are in your career, the higher the upside. So much more growth. Like, it gets harder the older you get, if that makes sense.
There's more at risk. And you just like, you're married.
Everybody's more guarded, busier, riskier. Like, even with forming friendships, you would notice today compared to when we were in university, just busier. It's not like people don't want to make friends anymore, but there's so many layers of things going on in people's lives that you just meet a random stranger that you become very good friends with. The way it used to be when you were a student, we're like, oh yeah, like, just exams and quizzes. You can just be talking to random people and maintaining those conversations. Now the bar is higher to build a friendship with a stranger, right? That's the last piece of advice, just being intentional about that. I tend to find a lot of people always trying to get like the magic answer from someone that knows it all type of thing. Like, that's important to a degree, but it's less about the advice you get from people and more about the relationships you build with people.
Build with them, because that advice would be valuable, but you can also find it on Google. The relationships, you can't find that easily.
Exactly.
That's very important. This has been so lovely. I have a feeling we're going to have you back because there's still so much to talk about. We have to talk about money for entrepreneurs. There's still so much, but thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your story. Like, I work closely with you since 2023 January to earlier this year. But even me, there's like some things that you shared today that I'd never heard, and I imagine anyone that's listening will find this very, very valuable. So thank you for making the time.
So pleased to be here. Yeah.
And for folks that want to find you, I know we talked about where to find BFN. So on Instagram, it's at BFN Community, and then on LinkedIn, it's Black Founders Network. But for you personally, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, good question. So Efosa Obano, so Efosa Obano on Instagram and Twitter, I guess X, it's at Efosa Obano. Okay. And then on LinkedIn, it is just Efosa Casey Obano on LinkedIn. Apologies, my response, if you message me, there's so many messages in all these things.
I imagine.
But like, I do respond. I do get back to people, and because I'm still trying to be true to those.
And you also have to be persistent, because sometimes everyone is messaging you, the messages go at the bottom, so you have to keep following up, which is such a good tool anyway for networking, is follow up, because don't take it personally. You think people are just ignoring you. People get very, very busy. But
and if you know Justina, and if anyone Justina introduces me to, I will.
Yes.
So that's, I guess, a tactic. If you're listening to this and you want to reach out, just reach out to Justina.
And if you reach out to me, I'll ask you if you're following the podcast. If you're not following the podcast, I'm not introducing you to Efosa.
Smart tactics.
Yeah, but this has been lovely. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed it. It has been so good that it's probably well over an hour, which is what we usually allocate for the episodes. But it's all valuable, it's all insightful, and it's all practical, most importantly. So I hope you come back with comments, insights, share your ideas on what you thought on this podcast, and come back for more, because we have more people doing exciting work in the community that will be on the podcast. And with that said, have a good one. Hi friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm very curious to hear from you. So let me know, what did you like about the episode? What resonated for you? What was food for thought for you? And beyond anything, make sure you like, you subscribe, you share this with your friend, because the more people we can get this information and these resources and these stories to, the more we can reach, the more we can impact. Let us know, what other topics do you want to see on the channel? What other guests do you want to interact with through the channel? We hope to hear from you, and until next time, bye.